Oh boy. Hallelujah. And prostitutes, or a prostitute, and a lamb, and there's a bride. What does it mean? What does it mean for you? The reason why I said we're skipping ahead is that we've looked over the first 3 chapters of the book of Revelation at the churches, and Jesus is talking to these churches, and he's saying, in essence, most of the time, what he's saying is, you're doing this okay, but this thing you gotta fix, and you gotta get back to me and grace and the gospel, and putting me back into the center of your life, Jesus would say. Over and over and over, he says this to the churches. And now we're skipping, and I know the book of Revelation can be a little tricky for folks. There's a lot of these symbols and imagery and things like that, and it's hard to understand what's going on here. And we're skipping a lot of chapters because we're getting to the end. The end. What's the whole point? Why do you go to church? Where's it heading? It's fool's gold, obviously, if you have no understanding of the future for your life, for what you're doing. Why do you go to work? Why do you wake up every morning? Why do you go to school? Why do you do this? Why do you do this? You have to know the why behind what you're doing. And so we're going to look tonight at why we go to church. What's it all going to? Where's it going to end? And it ends in a couple of places. Tonight what we'll see is it ends with a wedding dinner. And it means all the world to us that it ends this way. It's leading to a feast. It's leading to the supper with the Lamb. So I want to look at this tonight. You don't have an outline, but you can follow along, hopefully, and take some notes if you want. We'll look under the 3 headings. And the way I'm breaking it down this evening is this way. In your text, as you read, if you keep it open, there are pretty much 3 primary characters in this little narrative. I know there's a lot of like hallelujahs and there's a lot of like praising and it gets a little confusing, but if you boil it down, really what you get is 3 main characters. So let's look at them, each one by one. First, the prostitute. It's the problem with the world and with us. Secondly, the lamb. That's the solution. And then lastly, the bride. Ooh, that's the good part. The bride, what we can be, the results. So you have the prostitute. She represents the problem with the world. You have the lamb. He's the solution. And then you get the bride, resplendent on her wedding day. What do I mean by this? First of all, the problem. He says the prostitute has been vanquished. What is he referring to? What does he mean? Well, you have to go back to chapter 18, and I'll spare you. You don't have to go back there. You can look it back. The prostitute in this case represents, it's called Babylon. Babylon was the evilness, the representation, the very symbolic embodiment of pure evil. Why? Because if you go back to chapter 18, what you find is the prostitute represents the city of oppression and injustice and hatred and unfair business practices. Chapter 18 is filled with all of this. It describes Babylon. It says the merchants go there and all they do is try to make profit and they're going to swindle people. And he says Babylon is this prostitute who's going to cheat, and he talks about the sexual immorality of it. See, the prostitute, Babylon, it represents human society without a God, without God. Oppression, injustice, harshness, poverty, pain, loss, tragedy. And he says, that's Babylon. That's the prostitute. That's what's wrong with the world. Now, wait. The writer here essentially says, what's wrong with the world is this prostitute. Why doesn't he say murderer? Why doesn't he say liar? Why doesn't he say thief or scandal or cheat? He says the prostitute's the problem. Why? Because all throughout Scripture, if you go to the Old Testament and the New Testament, the relationship that God likens to his people is what? A marriage. As a way to say this, that when you and I sin, it's not just breaking rules. It's breaking the marriage. It's breaking his heart. There's a famous part, one of my favorite books, and I use this all the time, Hosea, and I love this story. And this is precisely why. What does God do? He goes to Hosea, and essentially he says, Hosea, I want you to work for me. I want you to be my prophet, but you will never know the relationship that I have with my people until you go marry a woman who will never, ever, 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 ever be faithful to you one day of her life. God's saying, go marry her. And in Hosea it says, when the Lord first spoke through Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, go, take yourself a wife of whoredom and have children of whoredom. For the land commits great whoredom by forsaking the Lord. That's a lot of whoredom, and I know it's a harsh word to hear because that's what God is saying. He's rubbing it in. Hosea, you want to know how my people treat me? Go get a wife, and she'll never be faithful to you because my people are never faithful to me. And it breaks my heart, he would say. It breaks my relationship. This is why the prostitute is the very embodiment of what's wrong with the world. Sin is not merely breaking rules. That's religion. Go down the street for that. Sin is breaking his heart. It's breaking his relationship because he says, I want to marry you. And I don't want you to go cheating on me. See, when God gives this illustration, and he does it all throughout Scripture, and he does it predominantly in the book of Revelation, where he says that my relationship to you guys, the church, is like the relationship between a husband to a wife. This is so radically unique. No other worldview holds that belief. As a way to say, you may worship him as Lord and as King. Good, you should. But he says, don't you see, I'm so much more than that. I'm your groom. And when you sin, it's not just simply breaking a rule. It's committing adultery in your marriage. See, in the marriage, the relationship, let me push this out a little bit further. Those of you who are married will know this to be true. You never, ever, ever, ever are more vulnerable with anybody else in your life than the person who you're married to. They see you naked, inside and out. They know you through and through, and you know them through and through, which is why in a marriage that the husband and the wife can inflict the most damage on each other. Why? Because they're most vulnerable to each other. You see now, God is pushing out this metaphor. He says the thing that's wrong with the world is not just you lied, tattle, tattle, bob, oh, that's bad. It's not that you just sinned, he says. It's that you cheated on me. And all I wanted to do was to love you. Hopefully this makes you see sin differently. Where's it all going? God says, the prostitute's dead. Babylon, sin, it's just adultery. And God says, I want you back in my bed. I want you in my arms. So what does he do? He gives us a solution. The lamb. See, the prostitute, Babylon, was the representation of pure evil. Why? Because it was pure cheating on God. It was saying, I can do this better, easier, without him. I will worship anything else in my life, my career, my family, my reputation, anything. I'll take it and I'll get into bed with that. And God says, get out of that bed. Come back to me. I'm the lamb. I want you to think about this for a second. It's a sort of a non sequitur. Commentators look at this and they think this is kind of puzzling. How do you go from a prostitute to a bride through a lamb? That's like mixing all the metaphors up, isn't it? I mean, that's really, if Jesus is giving metaphors, he's really not being very linear at this point. He's saying, listen, here's the prostitute on the one hand, and you could fall into those traps, and you can cheat on me, you can run out and worship and love everything else in your life except for me. Or you could be my bride again. What comes in the middle? The lamb at the wedding. Let me explain it further this way. In order to really parse out what Jesus is saying here, that he's the lamb, and what's the significance of it, you got to go back to the book of John, chapter 2. And there's this really interesting dialogue between Jesus and his mommy. They're at a wedding. The wine runs out. It's a crisis. It was a major crisis when the wine ran out at the wedding. And Mary, his mom, his little mommy, comes to him and says, Jesus, they're out of wine. And you know what Jesus does? He looks at her and he says this. He says, on the third day, there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus was also invited to the wedding with his disciples. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, they have no wine. And Jesus said to her, woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. If I'm Mary, I'm thinking, dude, I didn't ask you about your hour. What are you even talking about? I said they're out of wine. That's weird. Why would Jesus then say, my hour has not come? My hour has not come. Because every time in the book of John when Jesus says, my hour has come, what he means is his death. And I'm going to hold this. This is Aric speaking, not the Bible. That I think Jesus was probably at that wedding doing what almost every single person does at weddings. They think about their own wedding in the future. Don't you? You see that bride and that groom and you say, one day that'll be me. And I think Jesus is looking and he says, one day that'll be me. But it'll be my death. He says, my hour hasn't come. Mary says, I just said they're out of wine. What are you connecting this to? And he says, don't you see? I'm looking forward to the day when the church is my bride and they sit at the table with me. But I know, Jesus would say, that in order for that to happen, I need to die. The joy left the wedding that day because they ran out of wine. And Jesus knows that in the future, not too far away, he's going to sit in the garden. There's going to be a cup that's given to him, spiritually speaking. But it's not a cup of good tasting wine. It's a cup of wrath. And he sits in the garden and he says, God, if there's any other way, let this cup pass from me. Look what Jesus is doing at the wedding in John 2. He's saying, I see the future of what my wedding is going to be with the church. But it's going to take the cup of wrath being poured onto me. Why? So that you and I can sit at the table with him at some point in the future and can drink the greatest tasting wine in the world. And if you don't like wine, supplement it with anything else you want. The greatest cup of tea, coffee, I don't care, Coca-Cola, if that's your thing. But it's going to taste sweeter than it ever would here. Because the Lamb did what he did there when his hour came and he died for you and me. Jesus is saying, you got to understand that my relationship to you, to the church, is as that of a groom and a bride. When you wrong me, you cheat on me. And it breaks my heart, he would say. But my hour will come, I will die, and you get to be the bride. This is the last point. You and me, by the church, because of what he did for us, we get to be the bride. And I said this many times over the years, like the church gets to be the bride, and inevitably I always get one guy or so, one male, who bristles at this, like, how dare you call me a bride? Guys, there's nobody more beautiful on the wedding day than the bride. Right? For Jesus to look at you and me and say, you're my bride. He's saying, I see in you infinite beauty more than you can even see in yourself. Stop fiddling around. Come to the supper. And there's a few things that come with marriage. If you're going to be the bride, okay? You're the bride, he's the lamb, he's the groom. What does it mean? A couple things about marriage as I close. I'll say this. One, marriage, it's legal. When you marry the other person, you get what they've got automatically, regardless of whether you've earned it or not. Do you know this? You get access to them. Everything they have, you get. This is what Jesus says. When you marry me, you get what I got. You get heaven, glory, God, joy, happiness. Marriage is legal. Secondly, marriage is comprehensive. I remember when I first got married, we're celebrating yesterday, it was our 10-year anniversary. So you want to buy me a gift or us a gift, go ahead, please. 10 years, that's a good milestone. Yesterday was 10 years to the day that we celebrated our anniversary, my wedding. And I remember a short time after the wedding when I was coming home from work, and I kind of took a detour. It was downtown LA, and there was some traffic, and I didn't want to go around the thing, so I kind of buckled around. And I figured, whatever, if I take a little divergence. And then I saw the grocery store, and I said, well, I want to go get some groceries. So I went and got some groceries. I was about half an hour late. I got home, and my wife said, where were you? And then it dawned on me. I need to call her and tell her if I'm going to be half an hour late? Yeah. Marriage is comprehensive. That person does own you and your time. You're not a free agent anymore. And at the very least, marriage, if it's legal, it means you get what Jesus got. You didn't earn it, but you got it. And he has complete comprehensive rights over you, as a groom and as a bride would have over their spouse. Thirdly, marriage is intimate. I'm not going to push this too much further because it is church. I don't want to get too racy. Marriage is intimate. There needs to be contact. You can't have a marriage without touching the other person. And if you play this metaphor out, and Jesus is your groom, you got to be intimate with him. Don't give him just 5 minutes of your day at the end when you're tired and beat. Would you do that to your husband or wife? No. You give them all of you. And lastly, marriage is fruitful. Marriage produces things. Children. Now listen, whatever you get married to in life, if it's not to God, you'll produce fruit. But if you're married to your job, for example, what will you produce? Workaholism, stress, headaches, heartaches, high blood pressure. Something will be produced if you marry anything else except for the true groom, the Lamb. Because he's the only one who doesn't put conditions on you like that. You marry your job, you'll go up when it's up, you'll go down when it's down. You marry even your family, your reputation. When it's up, you're up. When it's down, you're down. Jesus is the only spouse who says, even when you're down, I'll be up and I'll lift you up. No conditions, love. No rules, grace. How do you get this? Doesn't that sound good? Marriage. If you're not married, I know you probably want to be, and I'm sitting up here for about 30 minutes now saying you got to get married to Jesus. And you're like, what the heck does that even mean? What's the point? What does it mean getting married to Jesus? What it means is this. First of all, let me tell you how you get it. Let me tell you then what it is at the end. How? You get it because, like I said, he sat in the garden. And when the cup, the joy cup, the cup of mercy and love, the cup of that good wine, that should have been given to him. You know what was given to him? The cup of wrath. Why? So you get the cup of joy. You know forever and ever now that one day you will meet with him in heaven and you will sit down at the table with him and you'll eat food like you never ate before. It's a feast. It's cups overflowing. Doesn't that sound great? Have I sold you on it? Good. Because he sat in the garden and he says, my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. He took the cross. You get the wedding cup. Let me tell you something a little about my wedding. 10 years ago, almost to the day. And I can look back and I remember everything that went wrong with my wedding. I was very involved in the planning process of my wedding. And so we got married, my wife and I, in Southern California, on what turned out to be the hottest day on record in the year. Isn't that nice, convenient? And we got married, stupidly enough, outside on a mountainside. So we're in all the sun. Everybody's pouring sweat, dying, and you know me, I have a fan on. I'm always hot. And I'm in a suit here, dying, suffocating. We had this like sand where they wanted to do, not the unity candle, but they wanted to put the two sand things together. And we didn't really want to do that. And you know why? Because the wind blew it and all the glass fell everywhere. As if that wasn't bad enough, the director of the wedding chapel actually started to clean up the sand in the middle of our wedding. I had to shoo him away. Go. We don't want the sand anyway. The sand broke. The hot and heat poured down. I remember all those things. But when I talk to people now, after 10 years, about my wedding day, do you know what they remember? If they're being nice to me. Maybe they're lying, but I think they're being nice. You know what they remember? They don't remember the heat. They don't remember the sand. At least they don't admit to much. They remember the food. It was good food. I handpicked it with my wife. We didn't cater and do that dry chicken thing. No offense if you do chicken at your wedding. It's not a big deal. But we didn't want to do that. And everybody to this day says, I remember the food. What does this mean for you? If you're married to the Lamb because he gave his life for you, you get the food. What then will bring you down? Neither the heat nor those silly little sandglasses breaking or all the other things that went wrong that I remember about my wedding because nobody else remembers it. They just remember the food and it was so good. Listen, you, me, the church, being married to Jesus means that one day you will sit with him at the table and you will get the greatest food of your life. You'll eat. You'll drink. And everything sad in your life will have become untrue. And all the hurt that you've gone through and all the pain that you've dealt with, all the loneliness you've experienced, no one will remember it because you'll be staring at him. The Lamb who says, let the cup pass, but if it doesn't, I'll drink it. I'll take it. You get to be the bride. Does that change your perspective on going to work tomorrow? Going to school? The gospel is the only thing that says it's good news for you. A lamb has died. You're the bride. You're beautiful. You're absolutely, stunningly beautiful. Come, eat, drink, be merry. Go in silent prayer to God now. Take a few moments and contemplate this, because what we're going to do over here at this table is take the cup and is take the bread, and this will just be a mere symbolic shadow of what you get in the end if he's your lamb. Take him. Pray on this now.